Huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Taylor. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cryptid Clues. Got a very, very good one for you guys today. But before we get to that, we're just going to do some quick plugs. Be sure to check us out on our website, cryptidclues.ca. We have our blog up there, and you can just tune in to see what of our latest episodes and all that jazz. You can also find us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, both Cryptid Clues, and you can also reach out to us. If you have any questions or you have a story or an encounter experience you want to discuss with us, just send us an email. cryptidclues@gmail.com, and then you can also reach us on our Patreon. We put up episodes earlier there, and we also have a couple episodes that are exclusive to the Patreon tiers as well. Shoutouts to Kapruka, our current Patreon primary Patreon patron. So thank you for being there since the beginning, and without further ado, let's get into this. So Reuben is not joining me today, and that was a heck of a debacle. We set up, we're going to do 2 episodes back to back, and the storm hit. And if you aren't aware, we're in British Columbia when we film these, and we have just been hit by massive storms and mudslides. So when he came out to do the episodes, the power went out as soon as he pulled into my driveway. It was crazy. So we couldn't get around to it. And then this week has just been crazy, just catching up on things and busy. So we haven't been able to get around. So this was a topic that I had kind of in my back pocket, that I had reached out to somebody, and I was waiting to discuss this topic on an episode. And I was waiting for the right moment like this, where, I couldn't lock Reuben down, and there's just, we do that once a week episode. We always got to get that episode out once a week for all you guys. So this is that episode. And this episode is going to be focusing on specifically gnomes. So I found this individual that had this experience, and I reached out to them. They didn't feel comfortable coming onto the show and speaking in real life in regards to their experience, but they granted me permission to use the story and to tell it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So kind of like the last episode, I'm going to read through the experience, but then afterwards, I don't have questions this time around. I'm just going to kind of go into analysis and look at all the different types of cryptids and small cryptids that could kind of fit into this category. So I'm going to read now this experience, quote, word for word, exactly as how they wrote it out. I saw a gnome, but I don't think I was supposed to see him. When I was still in elementary school, me and my family used to spend all summer at my great uncle's house. Me and my family slept in the same room, except for my sister, who'd sleep on a bed in the living room, and my great uncle, who'd sleep in his own room. That one was a pretty normal day. We went to the beach, we ate some pizza, and then at around 10 p.m. we all went to sleep. At around 4 a.m., I suddenly woke up because someone was throwing things around in the kitchen, plastic cups, containers, food, etc. The door was open, so I was able to see the light coming from the kitchen. So when I had enough of all that noise, I got up from the bed. At first, something seemed off. I thought I was having some sort of strange dream, and as any rational kid would do, I tried to see if I could bend fire like in Atla. Who wouldn't want to firebend? Atla, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I wasn't dreaming. My father wasn't in his bed, but I didn't care much since maybe he was just in the bathroom. My great uncle was fairly old and had trouble sleeping at night, so I thought he just went into the kitchen to get some water. Uncle, are you all right? All this noise woke me up, I said while making my way to the kitchen. To my surprise, the room was empty, but the light was on and the fridge was open with a can of Coke laying in front of it. What? I thought. I looked up to the shelf that was to my right, and I saw what was making that noise. Some sort of short creature, around 30 centimeters tall, a gnome you'd say, was looking at me, terrified. He was terrified because I saw him. I thought to myself, he's going to hurt me. Better if I fake to faint. And so I did. After a couple of seconds, I opened my eyes, and I saw that I wasn't on the kitchen floor anymore. I was in a strange, colorful tunnel. I got scared again and closed my eyes one more time. After a minute that felt like eternity, I reopened them, and I was laying in my bed. There were still sounds coming from the kitchen, but I was scared and just waited for them to stop. And before sunrise, they did. That wasn't the only encounter I had with that dude. But I never saw it again. I'd only hear him. Because I was, and am, too scared to see him again. I don't know what he was doing exactly, but I'm sure I wasn't supposed to see him. I know it sounds crazy. Feel free to ask me anything about this. An absolutely crazy experience. There was a few things that I noticed that I could kind of relate to, not necessarily other experiences, but similarities to other short cryptids. So I'm also just going to state that 30 centimeters is roughly just under a foot, just for that quick math. But gnomes are essentially reported to be around 3 to 5 feet tall, with human-like features. Usually encounters take place either at dawn or dusk, with many of their behaviors being fairly common across experiences. Non-aggressive, usually standing completely still, pretending not to be there at all if caught. Sightings have also included young and adult gnomes as well. So now I'm just going to go off into a few different other, variants you could say. Before I get to that, I'm just going to jump to a quick ad break. So we'll be back in one quick second. And we're back. So I'm going to start off with Pak Wedgies. Originating from the Wampanoag folklore, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Native American people that consisted of several tribes that grouped together during the 17th century, and today the Wampanoag people encompass 5 officially recognized tribes. Basically, the Pukwudgie, according to their folklore, is able to appear and disappear on command. According to legend, they lure people to their deaths, use magic, and have access to lethal weaponry, poisonous arrows, etc. They are reported to be roughly about 2 to 3 feet tall with human-like features. They have enlarged noses, fingers, and ears, and their skin is reportedly a smooth gray and has even been described as glowing at times. Now, if you do look up some imagery of these cryptids, they do have kind of like porcupine quills almost in some of their imagery, and then other images show them as kind of like almost like tiny little, not hobbit size, but obviously the roughly 3 feet tall and have the elf-like ears. And yeah, I'm not going fully in depth into each of these short cryptids because me and Reuben will at some point get to individual specific episodes that deep dive into all these different origins. But the next one that I have on my list, and I hope I'm pronouncing this one right as well, duendes, which is a humanoid figure from Latin America, Spain, and even Europe folklore. Described as being a little less than 2 feet tall, it's said they can be good or bad, depending on you or its mood. They are very protective of their homes and the boundaries they have established to live within. And some legends also say that only children can see duendes, and that duendes are also said to have an affinity for children, not in a frightened aspect, but more as a protector always offering kindness, whereas with adults, they could be kind but also mischievous. I found that very interesting as well, and I'm going to touch upon the friendliness towards children near the end of the episode. The next one I have, the Niece, or also known as the Tomt, are small, white-bearded gnome-like creatures, averaging at around 3 feet in height with human-like features, also said to have magical abilities. These figures appeared from Scandinavian folklore and tend to reside near or in farmhouses. Also said to protect children and animals from bad things. In Denmark, the Nices are described as beardless, wearing gray and red woolens along with a red hat. Like the duendes, Nices are described as having a temper, especially if offended. Now, I guess you could say if you're looking for a really, really good relation and source of like imagery, Niece or Tomt is basically like your garden gnome statue. Basically look at that and that's what it would be. Again, though, the duende has that similarity of having that temper and such, but protecting children, that's another thing that I found very intriguing. So another thing as well, the gneiss are supposedly something that would reside with farmhouses, and I think that's very interesting as well. And I'm going to touch upon that in relation to the story and the experience. The next cryptid that I have, the Michigan Gnome. This is much more of like a specific scenario in cryptid. So it's a folklore tale passed down from generation onwards and onwards. In the southeastern parts of Michigan, there is an even present day sightings of this cryptid that are still being reported. Some reports have been made in nature reserves that are located in more urban areas. So it seems like, again, there wasn't much in terms that I found that I wanted to go into with this, because this is going to be a great episode me and Ruben will do someday. But the Michigan Gnome, more or less, seems to be about 3 to 5 feet tall, human-like features, experiences happening dawn or dusk, with the behaviors being fairly common, like non-aggressive. So much more low-key than the other smaller cryptids in terms of having a temper. The similarities that I wanted to note here are this individual woke up in a tunnel that was all colorful. So I'm assuming there would be some sort of magic involved with that, or could be drugged or something of the mind. And the two that fit into that category for me, in my opinion, would be the gneiss or maybe even a duendes. And I say that because he didn't get hurt, but you have the scenario and the setup where he's a child, and you have the duendes and the gneiss that are both really friendly to kids and want to protect them. Now, this is something that I was thinking in retrospect, because I have nieces and nephews, and I know younger kids are always often talking about, playing in the backyard, playing in the garden, and setting up little fairy gardens and such like that. And if you have a duendes that can only be seen by kids, and your parents don't see it, then you have kids wanting to create tribute and set up a nice safe haven for these smaller individuals. And it's interesting, because what if they really are seeing something that we can't see? What if they are open and they notice something? I'm not saying it's as simple as, hey, you go out to get your kid out of the backyard, you pick them up, and you got them over your shoulder, and they're looking behind you, and you're walking back to the house, and they're looking back at their little gnome friend, and their gnome friend's waving, and you don't see it, obviously. I'm not thinking it's as significant as that, but I do wonder if maybe they're just aware of something. So it's just something that I was just playing around with the thought in the back of my mind. But another thing that they all seem to have in common is they appear to be very territorial. They hold a high regard for respect and property. Now, I've even read some accounts that additionally explain tunnels with many different entrances that are marked with little piles of rocks. And again, that is something that's usually associated with farmlands. People that have experiences with other sorts of cryptids, maybe a little bit of paranormal stuff, a couple Bigfoot stuff, and weird things happening on the property, they will sometimes talk about, hey, there's little people that are running around as well. And they pop up in one spot, disappear just as quickly as they came. But they usually pop up where these piles of rocks are. And would anyone go into the detail of going into these tunnels and stuff? I mean, not that anyone that's lived to tell the tale that I could find, but there was descriptions of people moving some of these rocks and seeing it's just a hole going into the ground. And I'm a big advocate for this, and I've talked about this on many occasions, where so many of these cryptids, I believe, use underground networks and underground cave systems to get from point A to point B really, really fast. I just think it makes the most sense, because there are so many cave systems and so many ways to progress from different points in Canada, especially in the United States, across the world. And it's just incredible how far these underground networks really go. And most of them are not explored. And this is something that I had mentioned again when we did our Pale Walkers episode. I was talking about, fracking is the term. And basically that is a system and a setup of them injecting down into the ground different materials just basically get access to other materials, and it can send ripples through the ground, and it can flush things out. And I'm not saying gnomes are essentially being flushed out, but what I'm implying is I think that there's a lot of human interference that can trigger certain things and certain events in cryptids. So it seems like gnomes, however, like to attach themselves to certain individuals. Maybe not the individual, more so the property. Now, the nieces, they are also said, as I mentioned, to attach themselves to animals and protect them from bad things. And that was one of the folklore in Scandinavian history, was that if you had a horse, because they have a special affinity for horses, and you had a really, really healthy horse, that was a sign that one of these tomts would have attached itself to that and was trying to protect it, keep it healthy and everything like that. So farms seem to be the specific thing, and that is something that was described in this story, which again I found very interesting. It's just this, it wasn't a in-town apartment, it was just a remote area. Again, it wasn't in Scandinavia, but it was definitely bearing similarities to the niece, which is why I think the niece is probably what this individual encountered and experienced. I know they also implied that whenever they bring it up, their family gets really, really angry at them. And I just get so disappointed when I hear that, because it's such a shame. These things are so incredible to experience, but I don't blame him for being frightened. If it keeps consistently happening and it's scaring him, then I really do feel bad for him. As incredible as it is, I do hope that he finds a way to resolve it and stop it. And I hope that he can get that somehow from, maybe he's got close friends, or they got, some extended family or something, because when you're experiencing things like that and your family doesn't believe you, it turns on you, that's just the most heartbreaking thing. Because if you feel isolated and you feel alone, I know I'm not implying these things are bad. I don't know these things and their intentions or whatnot, but there are these certain things that can take advantage of that. And in terms of cryptids, a lot of the times I do feel like, hey, they're just passing through, and you caught them when you're not supposed to. And that's something that's kind of like Bigfoot. You happen to be just at the wrong place at the right time, and you see one, and usually they're caught off guard. Usually every cryptid would be caught off guard, because I think they spend so much time trying to be so good at avoiding you. That being said, if you're in a guy's house and you're throwing food everywhere and you crack open a soda and everything, I'm sure you would, someone's going to wake up, like this individual did. But the gnome still seemed to be caught off guard. And even then, he performed the same tactic that was mentioned earlier, where when caught, they just freeze, just stopped. And again, he's startled. So I don't blame the gnome for being surprised, but it just makes you wonder, what kind of magic maybe, or mindset did he employ? And I know magic isn't really something that I can speak on, because it's such a... it's not necessarily backed by science, but I've never seen a gnome. I don't know what the capabilities are, but let's instead pretend that magic is just another word for, gosh, I don't even know the proper way to explain it, but an ability to maybe open up and access different areas surrounding us, I guess you could say. I don't want to say the worm like wormhole or portal or anything like that, but there are certain things in science that can add credibility to being able to do very incredible things that in otherwise we disbelief and we suspend. So when you have certain things and certain cryptids that could possibly tap into a higher frequency and a higher vibrational rate than a human being can, I think you can get some pretty crazy things that could unfold. Whether or not all the individuals in the house were being tricked into sleeping, and for some reason it just wore off on this child, or everyone was just heavy sleepers and the child just woke up and just found what was going on. The transition to being in this magical tunnel, again, it could have been a dream. It could have all been fake, but if it's reoccurring and that evidence is there of a mess in the kitchen, it poses the question, Am I doing this? Am I sleepwalking? Am I coming out and just creating a ruckus? Or am I genuinely experiencing something? Did something truly swoop me away into, I'm assuming, its lair or its cavern or whatever you want to call it? It's just fascinating. And at the end of the day, I do tend to believe that there are these smaller cryptids. Now, I know there's different types from across the world. And in Spain, the duendes are heavily talked about. And when I was looking into them, it's incredible how many local people actually truly believe in them. And I'm not saying that to using that as a way of swaying what I believe. I do believe in several of these individual cryptids, specifically because, I don't see any reason not to. You have the cave network systems, and you have ripe territory, and it's not solely just this one experience with a gnome, but there are lots of others out there, and there is even the footage you never know. It's same with Bigfoot Dogman. Can you believe it? At the end of the day, you got to take it with a grain of salt, form your own perspective and decision. But I just found it very interesting, and I do want to believe in several of these individual cryptids. So I'm curious what you guys think, and if any of you guys have had any experiences along these lines as well, I'd love to hear about them. So I think that's all I got, though, on this episode of Cryptid Clues. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait to get back and talk more about the specific cryptids. I'm going to get Reuben to come on to the show for next week's episode because we've got a couple topics that'll be really cool. We're going to be doing another location episode, actually. I'll just go ahead and say it. It's going to be the Canuck Chase. So that's got a rich history to it that we can't wait to discuss. And then we're also going to do our next episode at the same time. And we're going to get those on the Patreon right away. So if you have access to our Patreon, you get episodes usually a week out early, and you get other exclusive episodes that are just not available on the main feed. Other than that, like I said, plugs at the beginning, you can get us on our social media channels. We're on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and on our website, cryptidclues.ca. But yeah, any questions at all, cryptidclues@gmail.com. You can reach out and just say hi if you want. But yes, until next time, I'm Taylor. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.